My name is Julia Princelar, and I grew up in Thunder Bay in northwestern Ontario on Anishinaabe traditional territory. So I live on Lake Superior, and I spent most of my life there. So a lot of these tools have been collected over the years, as many hide tanners would know. So I could start with this draw knife. This is a tool that a lot of wood crafters would be familiar with. So this is what I've used if I'm taking raw tree logs to make a fleshing beam. So that's essentially like a large rounded post that you have leaned on an angle. And if I want to remove the bark and some of the wood beneath it, I would use the straw knife. And so essentially you're just pulling that towards you and it's shaving off as much, bark or wood as you want. So that's really great for the fleshing step of hides. So when you have the animal hide draped over and you just need to clean the flesh and the fat off of it, you can use a double-edged tool or a double-handled tool called a fleshing knife or a scraping knife, which essentially does look very similar to this, except the handles are more in line with the blade, and then you're sort of pushing off that material. Skinning tools are really, really useful for when you're skinning your animal. This is something that you might want to use on like a beaver. I've even used it on deer as well. So a nice kind of rounded edge to take off the skin and not cause any nicks or score marks in the skin. What else? This is just a regular knife. It's a friend of mine, Wolfhart Ironworks, who made this in Wisconsin. It's a Damascus blade, and it's just one of my nice kind of all-purpose full tang knives that I like to use. Apart from that, I've got scraping tools that are one-handed and used for different situations, but mostly dry scraping. So we can kind of start small and work our way up. So this is a fun little tool that one of my friends made, and it's just an antler, and I kind of had an idea, of what I wanted, and I drew it out for him, and he fashioned this for me. So you would just hold it in your hand like this, and it's got a beveled edge. You want to keep the edge fairly sharp, and then this would be used for dry scraping hide when it's on a rack. Similarly, this is just I think it's a painting tool really for scraping. You can get at a hardware store, just something with different angles and edges that I thought might be handy, and it works. This one's actually a rib bone, so similarly to like a double-handled fleshing or scraping tool that you would use on a beam, this is something that people would have used back when, there wasn't metal to fashion tools, and so this is a rib bone. I think it's made out of some kind of cervid, so maybe like a deer or a caribou. And a friend of mine just beveled an edge on it, and I've used it to flesh deer hides. It's nice because it's got a bit of a rounded edge as well, so it works with the beam pretty nicely. These larger pieces are also dry scraping tools that have been handmade. This one's made from a moose bone, so it's pretty heavy, so it's nice to have the weight with it, again with a really hard, heavy piece of steel beveled to a sharp edge. And so you would just hold it like this with the skin, the dry hide in front of you, and then scraping in a downward motion. So that was from a moose bone here. This is a similarly made tool out of salvage materials that a friend of mine also made for me. And I think this was made from like an old door frame, some kind of piece of wood, but it feels really nice in your hand. It's got a spot where you can just sort of hang on top and then really work your way down, and it's got some nice weight to it as well when you're dry scraping. So these two tools I've used frost scraping in the winter time on hide, and they seem to work really, really well at shaving it down. This last one here, I think it might look familiar. It's Antler Bone from Amber, and it's a really great kind of like all-purpose tool. It's nice and rounded, it fits in your hand, it's got a good bevel, so you can use it to scrape forward, but then also if you're looking at softening and working a hide when it's drying, this also seems to work really well. And lastly, this is a whisk. So, we all know what we can use whisks for, but in my case, I've actually used it to break up animal brains. So it's actually a piece of, I think, white pine, and then the branches have just been like heated and bent down and then gathered in the handle. So I just use it to break up the deer brains when I'm mixing them with water to prepare the tanning solution.